My first ever MOT failure. I would never have noticed this when checking the vehicle myself, but the MOT tester put his crowbar under the edge of the spring there and the cap snapped off, and you can see that's probably been broken for some time or cracked for some time, and then just the pieces of metal at the very sides were probably hanging on, but that came off when you leave it against it as part of his test. Other end didn't break. That thing weighs over 40 kilograms. Quite fun and games getting it off. I'm going to be replacing them both as a pair, because I've ordered the heavy duty ones from Jones Springs, £504 including delivery. Bit of annoying really. Hadn't expected to change these, especially as I intend to sell the van, and that was really why I was getting a fresh MOT on it. But there you go. Whoever ends up buying it will have brand new heavy duty springs on it. One interesting thing, while I've got it apart, quick check of the brake discs. Hardly any wear on those at all. I wouldn't be surprised if they've been changed not long before I bought the van. Some people say this is quite a hard job to do. I found it relatively easy. All the bolts undid without any trouble at all, and more importantly, none of them were seized up. So I was able to drop this out very, very quickly. And for anyone curious, the bolts that actually hold the spring in require a 24mm socket. Obviously two of those, one at each end. That bolt is the lower bolt for the shock absorber, 21mm. The shackles are 19, and that bolt there is for the lower tie arm, that's 18mm. I found it easier to undo the tie arm, or roll bar, whatever you want to call it, and the shock absorber, because it just made lowering the axle down onto my axle stand easier. I found that especially the roller bar, it was preventing it from dropping it down far enough to be able to manoeuvre the spring out. Bit of note on safety. I've got my safety jack stands there with a standard jack stand. These are 2-ton stands. They're supporting the vehicle at the jack-in points, but I've also got the van supported on the tow bar mountings at the back on a couple more jack stands, so the weight is probably 60% at the front and 40% on here, but it just gives me a very stable and safe platform. So those are 2-ton jack stands under there. They probably will support it, but I'm not going to risk it. And then a jack and a jack stand just to support the axle. I'm doing one side at a time. It just helps to keep the axle in line by keeping it located on the other spring that's still in place. I loosened off all the bolts whilst it was under the vehicle. I loosened off all the bolts before jacking up the vehicle, just to be certain in my own mind they wouldn't come undone. Otherwise I'd have had to get somebody in if they needed cutting off. And just because I'm me, I'm giving a coat of paint to the excuse me. Have I finished? I've finished. I'm giving a coat of paint to the mounting points. It was flaky and crusty. You can see where I've washed off the dirt and the old underseal, and I'm going to give that a spray with some more underseal as well. But it doesn't hurt to give it a bit of paint when you've got the bolts out of the way. It was a bit crappy under there, and I just happened to have some old yellow hammerite laying around that I used for painting the Bilstein shock absorbers on my V8 a few years ago. Right, now I've got to wait for the springs to turn up. I unpacked the springs this morning. They arrived yesterday, Friday. I ordered them on Tuesday, so that's pretty good going. Apparently the courier did try to deliver them on Thursday, but we've all heard that one before, haven't we? I just laid them out, and I thought I'd measure the distance between the pivot point that goes into the axle and each of the mounting bushes. The old spring, there's a 10mm difference between the point that rests in the axle and the bushes at the back. Sure enough, these are the same. It's 10mm shorter at the front than it is at the back. So that's the way I'm going to fit them. Now obviously, for all I know, that could have been on around the way, around the wrong way. But I'm going to assume that was correct. I'm going to assume that the wheel was roughly central in the wheel arch, and I will fit these. They're not marked on the springs, front and rear. You would think perhaps they would do that, but they're not. but certainly I've measured them, marked them up, job done. It comes with new U-bolts, and it also comes with inserts for the bushes if it's going on a van that's got smaller bolts. The bushes also arrive with plastic caps in. Knock them out. If you leave them in, you're not going to get the bolts in, and that can be annoying. Now, the only other thing I've just done is I've dropped off the rear spring hanger. It will be a lot easier to get the spring in position and get the front bolt in place and the U-bolts mounted on the centre point, and then I can wiggle that in afterwards. I think it will be difficult, I think, to get these bushes in between those gaps at both ends. So let's get one fitted. I've just come back from the MOT. Tess was quite happy. I didn't need to take the spring hanger off on this side. With the axle lowered low enough, you can manoeuvre them in. These springs are heavy, it is a two-person job. And what I did realise is it was a lot easier with the axle down as low as it would go. So I undid the anti-roll bar and the bottom bolt for the shock absorber, and then I lowered the axle down as low as it was safe to do so. And the limit is the hydraulic pipe to the brakes. So you do need to watch that, because if you drop it down too much, you're going to pull your pipe apart. So there we are. I did a shot under the vehicle just a second ago. Spent a bit of time rust treating and painting the, I don't know whether I can see it, right, painting the hangers as well. I didn't take the rear hanger off in the end, it wasn't necessary. So you can juggle it all in, but there you go. And I think possibly it's, I can't really tell. There's an extra leaf there because it's a 2+1 spring. There may be about an inch extra ride height added, but it's not significant. The difference is because of the extra leaf, the spring simply won't compress as much when the vehicle's heavily loaded. And this van at the moment weighs about 4,000 kilos. So I've still got a ton of payload on this. And if I ever did decide to refurbish this van myself and not sell it, which I intend to do, I could really go mad with wood interior, whatever else I like, and I've now got the springs on the back to take it. But there you go. There's plenty of other videos on YouTube showing you how to change springs, so I didn't actually record changing themselves. You know, it's just common sense. Doing the bolts up to the correct torque with the weight of the vehicle on its wheels, or in my case I put the axle on jack stands and then lower the vehicle down. But always do all the bolts up when the suspension's at rest, effectively, which is as it is now. It gives the most movement to the bushes. And I did the same with the shock absorber and also the anti-roll bar, as well as the spring shackles. And there you go, job done. Bit expensive, first ever MOT failure, but this is now good to go for many, many more years. Thanks for watching.